This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, everyone. I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are TNT Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crimes and Consequences. I'm Talia, and I'm sitting here with my lovely co-host and confidant, Tanya. How are ya?
I'm doing great today, Talia. How are you?
I am doing really well. I'm excited to share with you and our listeners this episode. You know, I just want to take 1 second, and this is not a commercial at all, but I want to thank our friends at Podcast Guru, which is this app, and I want to thank Joe, because they featured us this week. So a shout out to Podcast Guru. It's an app, and we're not getting any money for this. But thank you guys for actually featuring a little indie podcast like ours. Okay, today's true crime story is a local true crime story that I couldn't find another podcast on. And I couldn't find a lot of information on it, but I found enough to share with everybody, and I think it's a really interesting story. And for those of you who are new to listening to us, when I say a local story, it's the Detroit area because we are from the D. So let's begin. On July 16th in 1984, 15-year-old Kenneth Myers, known as Kenny, lived in Ferndale, Michigan. Kenny decided to go bike riding on his 10-speed bike. He was kind of small for his age. He was only 5 feet. He weighed 90 pounds, and he wanted to go for a bike ride. His mom said that's fine, so out he went on a typical summer day. When he failed to return home for dinner, his mom reported him missing. A witness came forward saying she had seen a beat-up brown station wagon with a white top approach Kenny in a parking lot. The driver of the station wagon got out, pushed Kenny off his bike, and grabbed him and threw him in the car. Then he sped off. Now, this witness didn't initially report this to the police because she thought the man was Kenny's father and that he was being scolded. He was getting in trouble. A few days later, 2 young boys found the partially clothed remains of Kenny in Hines Park near the Middle Rouge Riverbank in Westland, Michigan, which is about 30 minutes away from the parking lot Kenny was last spotted in. Hines Park is a massive park spanning over 6 cities with over 20 different park segments, so it's huge. The boys flagged down a police officer and thus began a murder investigation. Kenny's 10-speed bike was found a few hours later, and the next day they found the blue jersey shirt Kenny was wearing next to the tennis courts at the park. When the police spoke to Kenny's mother and told her about what they found, she told them one thing was missing from her son: his black plastic watch that she bought for him at a flea market a month earlier. An autopsy on Kenny determined the cause of death was strangulation via belt, but something really interesting was noted on the toxicology reports. Kenny had alcohol and weed in his system, and Kenny wasn't that kind of kid. Another boy came forward during the investigation and stated that he had been abducted by a man driving a brown station wagon, and he, too, was taken to Hines Park. At Hines Park, the perpetrator performed oral sex on the boy and then dropped him off in front of his house. Other teen boys came forward reporting similar occurrences, but the police had no suspects. Keep in mind, this is the exact same area where the still to this day unidentified killer, nicknamed the Oakland child killer, was abducting and murdering children. So a lot of people wondered if these crimes were connected. One of the biggest tragedies of Kenny's murder is that the media didn't seem to care. Kenny's mom formed a nonprofit called Kenny, and it was developed to help provide attention to missing kids. She ended up having to close this nonprofit down because of the apathy from the public.
Are you kidding me? That's terrible.
Nobody seemed to care. Kenny's murder received very little public awareness. And you'll see later in the story, had the public been aware, it could have saved more lives. Over a year later, on August 31st in 1985, which was Labor Day weekend, 13-year-old Shawn Moore was helping his dad mow the lawn. Shawn was born on June 30th, 1972 to Bruce, known as Bud, and Sharon Moore. Bud was a promotional director for the Ann Arbor News, and Sharon was an elementary teacher. Shawn was the youngest of 3 children, and he was raised in a middle-class home in Green Oak Township, Michigan. Like Kenny, Shawn was small for his age. He was only 4'10", and he weighed 85 pounds. Around 3 p.m. that day, the sun was blaring down, and it was like 90 degrees outside. While Shawn was mowing the lawnmower broke. Shawn wanted to cool down, so he asked his dad if he could ride to this convenience store nearby called Pump and Pantry. It was less than 2 miles from their house. He really wanted to get a root beer. He had bought a Huffy 10-speed bike with the money he earned, and his dad said that he could go ahead and ride that to the convenience store. But Bud told Shawn, "Don't be late coming home because we're going to have an early family dinner." The family was going to go see a movie around 7 p.m. at the local theater, so his dad wanted to make sure that Shawn didn't forget so he could be home in time. Shawn never made it home. A little after 3 p.m., which is just a few minutes after Shawn left his house, a police cruiser was sitting at a stop sign when a man pulled up behind him, flashing his lights on and off. The man got out of the car and he rushed over to the police officer and he told him, "I think we just saw a kidnapping." The witness described a boy being forced into a pickup truck. He went with the officer to the spot where the boy was seen being abducted, and there they found Shawn's bike on the side of the road. More police were called in and they started an investigation, but nobody knew who the boy was. The police began processing the scene and track dogs were called in. They confirmed that Shawn hadn't wandered away on foot. Now, while the police were processing the scene, Shawn's older brother, Scott, was sent out by Shawn's parents to go find Shawn. It was time to eat dinner, and then they were going to the movies. Scott approached one of the officers and said his family was really concerned that Shawn may have been in an accident. They were checking the hospitals, and he really wanted to see what was going on the side of the road. The officer took Scott aside and told him the awful news. They believed Shawn was the child kidnapped. Unlike what happened with Kenny, Shawn's kidnapping hit the news immediately. An Eastern Michigan University college student was watching the 11 p.m. news, and they aired a segment on Shawn's disappearance, and they also provided a tip line saying anybody who had any information, please come forward. So this college student called the tip line and said she saw a man, he was blonde, he was in his mid-20s, and he was driving a Jeep Renegade. The Jeep Renegade had blue letters on the side of it and blue letters on top that said Renegade. She saw this man yank Shawn off of his bike and drag him to the Jeep. Another witness came forward. This time it was a man, and he described something different than the college girl. He said he saw a man in his 40s talking to Shawn. Another witness came forward and said he saw a heavyset, quote, out of shape man in his 40s running after Shawn. So the police had these tips and they didn't know which one to believe because they varied. And the original witness that came forward to the police didn't get a good look at the perpetrator. And he had said there was a truck. The FBI was called in because it was a kidnapping, and they actually called in John Douglas, the famous FBI profiler. He did some background work, and he truly believed that the perpetrator was probably who the college student had said. From the facts John Douglas got from the crime, he felt like it would be somebody in his mid-20s. So the police focused on the college student's tip. They had her help them develop a composite sketch, and they released to the public a photo of a Jeep very similar to what she had seen. Ironically, at first, before the FBI became involved in the case, suspicions fell on Bud and Sharon because they were too overly optimistic that Shawn would be brought back home.
They're supposed to be optimistic, I would think. You don't want to think the darkest.
As investigators spent more time with them, they realized that Bud and Sharon were just desperate to be hopeful and had nothing to do with the crime. The profiler, John Douglas, also determined that whoever kidnapped Shawn had to be familiar with the area because he was kidnapped along the side of a busy road during the day. Often it's people that are comfortable with their surroundings that become more brazen. He also believed that the kidnapping of Shawn was a crime of opportunity and that the kidnapper was probably under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which helped him commit such a daring crime. The best lead the FBI got was actually from a cop. He suggested they speak with a man named Ronald Lloyd Bailey. Ronald had this fixation on young boys. And when the FBI pulled up his background, they immediately focused on him. A few days later, Ronald's co-worker called the tip line. He told the investigators that the Tuesday after Labor Day, which is 2 days after Shawn was kidnapped, he saw Ronald cleaning out his Jeep Renegade. And he said Ronald was a weirdo to begin with, but this was really weird. He asked Ronald, "Why are you cleaning out your car so thoroughly?" Apparently he spent like hours cleaning it out. And Ronald told him that he was going to go to a wedding Wednesday, the next day, and he really wanted his car to look nice. The tipster thought to himself, A, Ronald's weird to begin with, and B, who gets married on a Wednesday?
I was just thinking that.
On September 3rd, a command post was established in Brighton, Michigan, which isn't very far from Green Oaks. It consisted of the FBI, the Michigan State Police, the Brighton City Police, and the Sheriff's Department. And a reward fund for $60,000 was raised. A few days later, the police were able to bring Ronald in for an interview. He told the police that he couldn't have possibly taken Shawn because he had an alibi. He was in the Thumb area of Michigan, which is called Caseville. It's a city in the mitten, in the Thumb. But as I said, they knew Ronald's background. Do you want to know Ronald's background?
I was just going to ask.
Ronald was a 26-year-old high school graduate. He was white, and he had a very disturbing past. He worked as a local delivery man, and he lived with his parents, but he never got along with them very well. He coincidentally owned a Jeep Renegade. He had blonde, wavy hair, and he looked much younger than 26. His parents described him as a loner with a history of trouble with young boys.
What does that mean?
I'll tell you right after this commercial break. Hey everyone, if you go to our website, tntcrimes.com, you can find full unreleased episodes available for individual purchase. You can also join our membership where you get unlimited access to all of our unreleased episodes and early releases, mini episodes, and so many other awesome things. So go to tntcrimes.com. And thanks again for all your support. Ronald Bailey was born February 2nd, 1959, to two parents who were described as really good people who just happened to have a monster for a son. Ronald had his first sexual experience in third grade with another third grade boy. In 1972, when he was only 13 years old, Ronald kidnapped a boy who was riding his bike, and he took him to the woods behind a school. There he molested the boy. Ronald got caught, and instead of getting in trouble with the law, he got sent to the Hawthorne Center, which was a psychiatric center. Eventually, he was released about a year later, in 1973, when he was 14, and immediately he abducted a 15-year-old boy by putting a knife to his neck, tying his hands, and carrying him off on his bicycle to a nearby bus yard.
And he was 14?
Yeah, he was 14, and he managed to kidnap a boy and put him on his bike. At the bus yard, he raped the boy, and then he let him go. The victim went to the police, and he was shown yearbooks, and he was able to pick out Ronald as a perpetrator. Once again, Ronald was put in the Hawthorne Psychiatric Center for 14 weeks, and then he was released. A few months later, on June 2nd of 1974, he abducted another boy. This boy was 12. He abducted him at knife point while the boy was riding his bike. He fondled the boy's genitals and tried to choke him. Once again, this boy was able to pick out Ronald as a perpetrator, and Ronald was sent to the Hawthorne Psychiatric Center.
Whatever's going on at Hawthorne is not working, apparently.
While there, Ronald explained that, quote, an impulse jumped into my head, and I went out and kidnapped a boy. It was just an urge to do it, to take him, to have him. I don't know if it was sex or what. After 8 weeks, he was discharged because his behavior was deemed good.
Well, there's no one to kidnap at a psych ward, right?
I guess not.
I would be good too.
Back then, a lot of people thought that homosexuality was a mental illness. And I think that's why they kept sending him back to the psych ward. When Ronald was 16, he kidnapped a boy from the local mall. He did it by threatening him with a fishing knife. Then he rode the boy on his bike to an open field, forced him to take some pills and alcohol. Then he pulled the boy's pants down and choked the boy until he passed out. When the boy came to, Ronald was gone. The victim was able to identify Ronald, and this time, instead of being sent to the Hawthorne Psychiatric Center, he was actually sent to the Wayne County Juvenile Home near Detroit. The Wayne County Juvenile Home felt that Ronald didn't belong there. They really thought he needed to be shipped back to the Hawthorne Psychiatric Center. While they were trying to develop a long-term plan for Ronald, they allowed him to be released to the care of his parents. Before long, his dad, Al, called the police to report that Ronald had, quote, flipped out. I don't know what that means. And once again, he was sent to a psychiatric center. There at the hospital, he had his first of only 2 sexual experiences with a woman. It was a female nurse in her 20s.
Get out of here.
I can't make it up. Not only was he banging this female nurse, he was molesting younger boys at the center. After 7 weeks in the psych ward, Ronald ran away. I don't know why, because he was clearly enjoying himself somewhat. He was eventually caught and spent the next few months going back and forth between the juvie and the psychiatric centers. He was eventually sent to a psychiatric center in Northville, and his primary therapist was a man named Dr. Jose Tombo. In 1977, Ronald got caught using drugs and making sexual advances to another patient at the psychiatric center. Dr. Tombo defended Ronald and said that was, quote, part of a normal growth pattern. He dismissed all concerns, and in October of 1977, Dr. Tombo approved the release of Ronald, diagnosing him as suffering from, are you ready for this? Adjustment reaction of adolescence.
So because he was just growing up and dealing with teenager problems?
He just had some teen problems.
That's ridiculous. What kind of doctor is this?
He's a psychiatrist. The courts ordered Ronald to have 5 years probation and to continue seeing Dr. Tombo for another 5 years. 3 years later, in 1980, 21-year-old Ronald moved to Summerfield, Florida, with a friend where he got a job delivering tires. This was a violation of his probation, but he didn't seem to care. During the 3 years he lived in Florida, he kidnapped and raped several boys between the ages of 14 and 16. Almost all of them had blonde hair and resembled himself when he was that age. He would place belts or elastic bands around his victims' necks to help enhance their sexual experience, which is ironic because they were being raped.
And probably terrified.
Exactly. Eventually, Ronald got caught when he approached a young boy in a trailer park and said, quote, "Why don't you suck my dick?" The boy's family called the police, and Ronald was put on probation for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. He decided to hightail it out of Florida, and he moved back to Livonia, Michigan, which is near Detroit. An interesting note is during the 3 years he lived in Florida, police suspect that he raped and murdered 2 teen boys. I tried to find out who these murdered teens were. I did a bunch of research, but I couldn't come up with anything. A month before Kenny's murder, in June of 1984, a 15-year-old boy was kidnapped from Redford Township, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit, and he was raped just like Kenny. So that's what we know about Ronald Lloyd Bailey's background. As I stated, the investigators talked to Ronald, and they asked about where he was on the day Shawn disappeared, and he gave them his alibi about fishing. According to Ronald, he went to Caseville, Michigan with a young boy to go fishing and boating for the weekend. Labor Day is a big holiday in Michigan. Everybody's outdoors. Everybody's at their cabin, so this was a completely normal thing to do. He said fishing sucked, so they decided to cut the trip short, and he headed back home on Monday, which was Labor Day. In interviewing other people, the detectives found out that Ronald had something surprising, a girlfriend.
He did?
He did. But what's interesting is John Douglas's profile of the kidnapper said the guy would be homosexual, but would have a girlfriend that he pretended to be sexually interested in. Ronald had a girlfriend named Debbie, and Debbie had a cabin that belonged to her family. Ronald had access to this cabin, and he knew that it would be completely and utterly vacant on Labor Day weekend. The cabin was located about 150 miles north of where Shawn disappeared from. Ronald and Debbie's brother were actually planning on going there that next weekend. During the follow-up, the police interviewed the young boy that Ronald went up to the cabin with. And he told them, "Yeah, I was supposed to go to the cabin with Ronald, but my mom found out and she told me I couldn't go." He said when he told Ronald he couldn't go, Ronald was very upset and very disappointed. In fact, he slammed the phone down. The police tried to talk to Ronald about the inconsistencies with his story, and he was like, "Time out. I need a lawyer. Which I'm advising anybody and everybody to always just get a lawyer. Shut your mouth. You're not smarter than the police. The next day, Ronald was put in a lineup, and he was shown to some of the witnesses. None of them recognized him as a perpetrator. He was questioned for 6 hours, and then they had nothing to hold him, so he had to be released. A surveillance team was put on Ronald, and they followed him to the ATM machine where he withdrew hundreds of dollars. And then he drove to the Detroit Metro Airport, bought a ticket to Orlando, Florida, and hopped on a plane. But so did the FBI. At the same time, 25 police officers went to the Gladwin cabin, which is Debbie's parents' cabin, to try to locate Shawn. Now, this is 2 weeks after Shawn disappeared. A man in a neighboring cabin told the investigators he had seen Shawn at the cabin with Ronald, and they were hanging clothes on a clothesline outside to dry. As the investigators were walking around outside, they saw an unusual amount of vultures and scavengers in a wooded area, so they headed down this dirt path. There at 10:30 a.m. on the side of the path in the state forest, about 2.5 miles from a cabin where Ronald's girlfriend's parents owned in Gladwin, they found the nude body of Shawn. It had been tented with twigs and leaves and shrubbery, basically covering his whole body, but the smell and the animals led them to it. As a result of the hot weather, animals and insects had already facilitated the decomposition, and his skull and his rib cage could be seen. They had to use dental records to identify him. And let me tell you, Shawn was the cutest little boy. He was so cute. Not that it matters. I'm just saying.
I know.
He was absolutely a beautiful boy. That's one of the things they talk about in any article you find on Shawn, is how absolutely gorgeous this child was. A medical examiner performed an autopsy but was unable to determine the cause of death due to the decomposition. More witnesses came forward to say that they'd seen that Jeep that matched Ronald's Jeep at the cabin that weekend, that they also saw Shawn there. One witness even saw Ronald sitting on the hood of his Jeep, less than 50 feet away from where Shawn's body was found. As a result of this, the investigators were able to issue a warrant for Ronald's arrest. And when the FBI went to get him in Florida, they kicked down the door of the trailer he was at. It was a friend's house. To their surprise, he was gone. He had been listening with his friends to the police scanner, and they were coming.
Great.
Like,
Oh,
why?
man.
Why, as a police, attention, we're coming to get you? I mean, what is this? As a result, 200 federal and state authorities went on a manhunt in the swampy Florida land. Days later, a landowner went out to his shed, and he opened it up, and he found Ronald hiding in it, basically being eaten alive by bugs.
Oh.
This is Florida, and this is the summer, and this is swampy.
Mosquitoes everywhere, I bet.
Everywhere. He went to call the police, but Ronald took off. Eventually, Ronald exited the swampy forest, and he surrendered peacefully. So he was extradited to Livingston County Jail, where he was booked on premeditated murder charges. Ronald is so weird, because after they booked him and they were interviewing him, he kept asking them when he could get his watch back. They'd removed it during processing. It was a black plastic watch, and that's all he could focus on, is getting it back. Obviously, it ended up being Kenny's.
He's probably shitting bricks, thinking it's going to be tied to Kenny, I'm sure.
He's already under arrest for Shawn's murder. It could just be that it was...
A memento.
Could just be that it was a memento. Shawn was buried, and his gravestone reads to this day, son, brother, friend, smiling, hugging, teasing, family, Mr. Peabody, mouse, inventor, artist, biker, fun-loving Shawn.
Oh.
Ronald was examined in October, about a month later, by mental health professionals at the Regional Forensic Center, and he was deemed to be sane. Ronald actually started opening up to authorities and speaking to John Douglas in the hopes of helping them understand his deviant mind. One of the things that interested everyone was the information Ronald told them about his therapist, Dr. Tombaugh. Dr. Tombaugh engaged in a sexual relationship with Ronald while he was a patient at the Northville Regional Psychiatric Center.
I knew it! Literally,
right.
I was thinking about it.
This relationship continued after Ronald's release because he was forced to have those psychiatric sessions with Dr. Tombaugh. Dr. Tombaugh would have sex with Ronald and choke him with a belt or some other form of a ligature. He would tell Ronald that the sex and the strangulation were part of his therapy.
Oh my God. Please tell me Dr. Tombaugh got in big trouble.
Dr. Tombaugh does not get in big trouble.
He doesn't?
It just depends on your definition of big, but I'll get to that. Dr. Tombaugh even took Ronald away for a weekend to a hotel in Windsor, Canada, where he had sex with him. 6 other former patients came forward and accused Dr. Tombaugh of molesting them during their therapy. In December of 1985, Dr. Tombaugh was fired from the psychiatric center because he was still working there.
Unbelievable.
And his license was revoked. A hearing was held to appeal the license revocation, and Ronald actually was a key witness to testify to the abuse he suffered at the hands of Dr. Tombaugh. Ronald was tried for first-degree murder and kidnapping against Shawn. A jury of 5 women and 7 men convened, and during the trial, Ronald admitted his guilt. But he tried to convince the jury that he was insane, and he put the majority of the blame on Dr. Tombaugh and what he did to him. He took the stand, and he cried, and he acted remorseful. When he was asked why he strangled Shawn, he stated, quote, "I thought he was me." He acknowledged 3 times that he knew killing Shawn was wrong. According to Ronald, he'd been driven insane by the sexual relationship he'd had with Dr. Tombaugh. A psychiatrist that evaluated Ronald in October of 85 took the stand and said Ronald had borderline personality disorder, he was a homosexual pedophile, and a sexual sadist. But none of them, again, are any form of mental illness. During Ronald's testimony, he told the jury what happened to Shawn. Ronald had been planning a big, fun Labor Day weekend at the cabin, and he was really upset when that boy canceled on him. He desperately tried to find someone else to go with him. He called up Debbie, his girlfriend. Debbie said she had to babysit. He called another friend who said he was sick. Another friend had a wedding to go to, and his cousin said he couldn't go. He ran out of people. He started driving around in his new Jeep. He drove for hours while drinking beer and smoking weed. He also chain smoked cigarettes. He hung out at a day party because it's Labor Day weekend. You know, everybody's grilling in Michigan. And eventually left in his Jeep to go get a pack of cigarettes at the nearby pump and pantry. While there, he saw Shawn Moore wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, sitting on the curb next to his bike, drinking his root beer. Ronald thought he was extremely beautiful. He had this blonde hair that resembled Ronald. He thought Shawn was, quote, the best-looking boy around. Ronald sat in his Jeep and watched Shawn for a few minutes while he drank the root beer. Then Shawn left the convenience store and headed back to his house. He headed back on a service road. Ronald came up behind Shawn, quickly parked his car, and he shouted out to Shawn, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Come here, I need to talk to you." Shawn stopped riding his bike, and he turned around and he talked to Ronald on the side of the road for a few minutes. Ronald gave this ruse that he didn't know where he was at. Then he put his arm around Shawn's shoulder and twisted him around, causing Shawn to fall off his bike. He told Shawn, "I have a knife and you need to go with me." Unfortunately, Shawn didn't know that he really didn't have a knife.
Oh.
Shawn complied and got into the Jeep. He started mumbling something about not being able to be gone long. "I can't be gone long." And Ronald started driving the Jeep around. He had no real plan. He started talking to Shawn about his school, and he told Shawn, "I'm not going to hurt you, but I want to take you to this cabin so we can have a weekend of fun." He drove Shawn to the cabin in Gladwin. In Ronald's mind, he had convinced himself that Shawn was a new friend. He wasn't even concerned that Shawn would run away. Ronald stopped to get more cigarettes because he was a chain smoker, and he waited in his Jeep while Shawn actually went into the gas station and used the bathroom. In his mind, he had a new BFF. And Shawn actually came back. Then they made their way to the cabin. The cabin itself was very rustic. It was a one-bedroom cabin with a kitchen, and it had an outhouse for a bathroom. The two hung out in the cabin while Ronald made Shawn some mac and cheese. Then Ronald drank beer and smoked some weed. Ronald says he convinced Shawn to smoke weed too, but it could very well be that he forced Shawn to. He showed Shawn his .22 rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun, and he actually let Shawn hold him, and according to Ronald, they played with him, whatever that means. Ronald kept drinking and smoking weed, and then he took mescaline, which causes hallucinations, and he took some Valium.
Jeez.
Yeah, he had a little party going on in his head. He gave Shawn an antihistamine, something like a Benadryl, that caused Shawn to fall asleep. Shawn and Ronald slept together on the lower bottom bunk of a bunk bed, and there was no sexual activity. The two woke up the next morning, and Ronald had a terrible hangover. Shawn asked Ronald, "Do you still intend on taking me home?" And Ronald assured him, "Yeah, you're going to be totally fine. I'm not going to cause you any harm. You just need to relax." Later that afternoon, Ronald got Shawn to start drinking more beer with him. And he had Shawn smoke more weed with him. And Shawn was in some sort of stupor. That's when Ronald started to molest Shawn. He performed oral sex on him, and then he came on Shawn's belly. He later raped Shawn, but he said he started to feel guilty because what he did to Shawn is what was done to him, but not guilty enough to stop. Towards that evening, he started to have sex again with Shawn, but this time he put a belt around his neck, telling Shawn it would make it feel better. Then, according to Ronald, this strange feeling overcame him. He left the cabin and went for a walk to clear his head. Now, I refuse to believe that Shawn wasn't tied up at this point. He was either A, unconscious, or B, tied up. But Ronald acts as if that's not the case. According to Ronald, Shawn's just laying on the bed, and Ronald's clearing his head. When Ronald came back from his walk, he says he straddled Shawn on the bed and he tightened the belt. At first, Shawn struggled, but Ronald held him down until he didn't move anymore. Then Ronald spent the night sleeping next to Shawn's body. The next morning, Ronald woke up and he felt Shawn's legs, and they were cold and stiff. The belt was still tightly around Shawn's neck, and Ronald claims he ran out of the cabin vomiting. He was so upset that he started drinking alcohol and smoking more weed to deal with the situation. He went to a local restaurant to grab something to eat, even though he just vomited, and to get a coffee to help him with his hangover. Then he headed back to the cabin to figure out what to do with the body of Shawn. By then, Shawn's body was stiff, so he picked it up by an arm and a leg, and he put it in the back of his Jeep. And he drove around until he found a place on the side of the road that looked like a good spot to dump Shawn's body. That's when he covered it with a lot of sticks and ferns and leaves, and he left. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found 27-year-old Ronald Lloyd Bailey guilty of the kidnapping and premeditated murder of Shawn Moore, and they deemed him to be sane. He was sentenced to life, which is the mandatory sentence given for premeditated murder in the state of Michigan. And the judge spoke to Ronald and said, quote, "You are responsible. You may have impulses, but you chose to do evil. You are a cold, calculated predator. You made the choice to kill, and you'll never walk the streets again." After that, there was a trial for Kenny. By the grace of God, there's some justice for Kenny's mom, Marie. The investigators knew at this point that Ronald was clearly responsible for the kidnap and murder of Kenny Myers. He owned a brown Buick station wagon at the time which matched the description of the one that took Kenny and the one that molested some other boys. A month after being found guilty of Shawn's murder, there was a bench trial for the kidnapping of Kenny. Now, a bench trial, as you know, Tanya, is where there's no jury. It's just where a judge decides the innocence or guilt of someone. The judge found Ronald guilty of the crimes against Kenny and was given 60 to 90 years. Ronald apologized to Kenny's mother, Marie, but she said the only person Ronald should apologize to was Kenny, and that would have been before he killed him. In talking more to John Douglas, Ronald told John that he had to kill the most beautiful boys of all, those that reminded him of himself. And when he killed Shawn, he was really killing his younger self, thereby ridding the world of the harm his adult self would cause.
Damn.
Think about that for a second. That's some sort of time loop thing.
Yes, for sure. Wow.
Some sort of bizarre sci-fi movie thing. I don't know. One other reason that he said he killed Shawn was because he was a very jealous person and didn't ever want Shawn to have sex with another person.
That is disgusting.
And now you know about serial killer Ronald Lloyd Bailey. He is currently locked up in the Michigan Department of Corrections system. At one point, they had to transfer him out of state because so many people wanted to harm him in prison. But he is back in Michigan where he will die.
He's been in prison, 30 plus years now? Well over 30 years.
And we have photos of him on our website. You can see what he looked like at the time of the crimes. And he looked young. He looked like a teenager doing these things. Ronald's attorney actually said he didn't think Ronald was evil. He thought he was a misguided soul.
Misguided?
That's Ronald Lloyd Bailey.
Well, thanks, Talia. And thanks for everyone for listening.
And we have more episodes that you can't find on the podcast where you're listening to, but you can find online or by becoming a member at patreon.com/TNTcrimes, or you can go to our website, tntcrimes.com.
You can also find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we do episode highlights where we show pictures and things like that, recaps of all of our episodes. So check us out there at TNT Crimes.
And again, if you want to get early releases or commercial-free episodes or exclusive bonus material, go to patreon.com at TNT Crimes. Help support us because Tanya and I do not get paid to do this. We rely on the support of you guys out there. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
And before we go, we've got a couple shout outs.
Oh, yes, we do.
We have some new members, and they are Deborah W.
Thank you.
And Trish C. And we have German R.
Thank you, German R.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And I hope you guys are staying safe and have a great day. Don't forget to check us out next week where Tanya's going to release an amazing episode.
Until next week.
Bye, everybody. Thanks
Bye.
again.